Sentence 22.7. In sentence 22.7, there's a DP, which is the lady's glass. And I couldn't quite get that, the S that is, separated. I couldn't quite get that analysis. And then I have two other sentences that I have doubts just in one place, but I would like to check it out.
Imagine that we have this phrase, for example, John's book. Okay. What is it that we are talking about? John or the book?
The book. No? Oh, okay. That's why I couldn't quite get that.
Any other possibility?
That the book is the genitive.
In this phrase, we are not talking about either the book or about John, but about the relationship that exists between them. The head of, whenever you have something in the genitive case, the head is this, the one that establishes the relationship. Then the point is that in this case, this determiner, this particular determiner, establishes a connection.
I cannot see what you are saying. Are you writing something? But because I cannot see it.
How come? What are the others?
Yes, Jose's sharing screen, Gaby. You have to put view, and I don't know if you're on your cell phone.
Yes, I am seeing the screen. I'm seeing. Oh yes. It was zoomed in so much that I couldn't quite get the D and the S. Sorry.
Okay. Well, when I have something in the genitive case, it's the S that is the head of all that phrase. This S is establishing the connection. We know that the genitive can mean way too many things, one of which is, for example, possession, okay? But many other issues, okay? The point is that this establishes the connection between two items. That is why then this will have an intermediate and a maximal projection. In complement position of this, as you can never say, for example, something like John's that book, or let's say John's the book, etc. Okay. John's book.
There's a noun.
Okay, that's why all of the others are grammatical, this is also ungrammatical, this is also ungrammatical. So in complement position of the S, we will have a noun, which in this case is book. In specified position, on the other hand, we can have, let's say, something like my father spoke of the teachers. So in specified position of this determiner, there is a GP. which in this case, we have John, or the teacher, or my father, or whatever. Okay, so this is the
Great.
This is in the case of something in the genitive case. Okay?
Yes, very clear. So it's the relationship. And then I have doubts with 22.9 from the word that upwards, because then the clause I understand everything, but I have a kind of mixture from the clause from that he had loaded on upwards in the analysis. And I couldn't quite get the correction because in this sentence, and there was another, I think it's 22:12, you said V core plus V shell, and I couldn't quite get the phases, the steps to get to the, like the mixture is between the word that and may. Then upwards, I have no problem with the tense and all that, but I have a problem there.
You mean that from the embedded clones downwards?
So the CP that starts with that downwards, I don't have.
Okay, from this part,
I have a kind of mix.
Okay, now what's going on above this part? This clause becomes the complement of what?
Of realize.
Yes. Realized still has how many arguments?
2.
One is the whole GP, the whole CP, the blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, have we got any other, let's say the other argument is?
Nobody.
Nobody.
And it's an external argument. That's why I have doubts.
Okay. If it is an external argument, meaning if we don't have any other internal argument, we close here the VP core. Because the VP core is the domain in which the internal arguments generate.
So no V prime, V majúscula prime.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that was my, okay.
Because we have only one internal argument, okay? Which is what happens very frequently in the so-called transitive verbs, okay? Now, nobody is what kind of argument? It's an external argument. External argument, it generates
shell.
Absolutely. Yes, in the phi shell domain, which means that realized will undergo head-to-head movement to give room to the external argument, which in this case is nobody. Meaning the external argument always generates in specified position of V shell.
Yes, that's why it was odd for me, because this kind of head-to-head movement just so close, sorry. I wasn't like a bit confused because there was no V prime, I don't know, capital letter.
No problem.
There's no need because there's no argument, there's no
additional internal argument. In this case, you have only one internal argument, which is the whole CP. So
the V core will be from the CP to VP or something like that.
No, the V core is from this point downwards.
Downwards.
Yes.
Great.
Because all of the CP, which I assume is kind of a longish thing, okay? All of the CP, okay, well, not necessarily that longish, but all of the CP is the internal argument of realized. Okay?
Yes.
What you call, for example, let's make the connection between this and what happens in traditional grammar. Let's say, if I can very well say, I don't know, my son was reading a book, full stop, very simple sentence, okay? Meaning the complement of reading is clearly an internal argument, okay? I could have said, my son was reading what I bought last week, what I bought in the supermarket last week. Okay, so all of that is a clause, not a GP. The internal argument of reading in that other case would have been a clause. Okay, which is pretty much what happens here. Okay, right? And with many of these verbs of communication, verbs of noticing, tend to select an internal argument, which is a clause. Okay.
Great.
Then,
can we go upwards with the perfect
yes.
phrase?
Yes, of course. All of this part is the V shell. And V shell plus V core make up the lexical domain. From this point downwards, up to the very end, we have the lexical domain of the realized clause. Okay? Now, we will pass on to the functional domain of the realized clause. In this case, in the realized clause, we have two auxiliaries. Okay? Then, some other color. Yeah, only one of them will be called T, which is precisely the one to the left. So all of the others will be given a different label. So perfective, yeah, perfective phrase. Then T is occupied by Mary. Yes, Mary. T, as you very well know, has got an intermediate projection T prime and the maximum projection TP. So in specified position of T, we will have to locate the so-called subject, which comes from somewhere else in the tree. Yeah. From the lexical domain, as it has got some meaning. Because it's up there. So this operation, which is called argument movement. Okay. Now, why does this movement occur here? By the way, are you there? I can see you.
To build the tense phrase. Or not?
No. This happens because of two reasons. This argument movement happens because of two reasons. I don't know whether we mentioned them. Yes. On the one hand, to satisfy the EPP feature of T, meaning what? To become the subject of T. And on the other hand, to get nominative case. Okay, because of these two reasons, this movement takes place. Okay.
The nominative case is given by what in this case?
By T.
By T, okay.
To tell you the truth, for the time being, we can call it by T. Then, it's arguable whether by T or by C, never mind, okay? But let's assume that it's given by T, okay? Which, to tell you the truth, is the latest version.
Sorry, I lost connection just when you explained the two reasons. But then, well,
okay.
I will.
Two reasons, never mind. Well, let me repeat them, okay? But anyway, you have them, and I will repeat them systematically because they will appear more than once, okay? No other trees.
Thank you.
This argument movement occurs because of two reasons. One of which is to satisfy the EPP feature of T, or extended projection principle of T. Okay, that's a feature of T, meaning the need for T to have a subject. And the other reason is because nobody needs to be given or to be assigned nominative case. And this happens in that position.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Any other queries?
I think that with this explanation, I can understand the ones that are the other sentences because they have the same structure.
Anybody? Other questions?
Jose, in a phrase like the country's crime rate, that we have two nouns, I don't understand how to generate the sentence in that case.
Okay. Yes, because this happens in one of the sentences that you said. Okay, the country's crime rate. Okay. Well, in this case, we need to understand what modifies what. Okay. In a way, what we're saying is that, again, there is a relationship established by the S here. Okay. In a way, this is establishing the relationship between the crime rate of the country. Okay. Apart from that, crime is modifying rate. I could say this is the rate of the country, and the crime is of the rate. Okay. So this is one case in which something like this happens. This is the head of all of that phrase, which again has got two elements. That's why in this case we do have an intermediate projection T prime and then eventually maximal projection TP. Okay. So far so good? Okay, pretty much the same as what we said before. Now, let's say to the left of this one, we have some other TP, which is the country. Meaning we're talking about something of the country. Okay? Now, in a way, what we are saying is that we're talking about the rate of the crime of the country. Okay? So the other element, the other, for example, thing would have been, let's say, rate. Okay? But rate is also modified or more specifically pre-modified by crime. Then, if that is the case, what we will have here is a noun phrase at the bottom of which, or let's say whose head is the noun rate, which is pre-modified by some other element, which is the noun crime. I use it in different colors so that you recognize what the head of what is. Okay. In this case, what we are saying is that this noun crime has been attached to the noun phrase rate. Okay. In any other occasion, we would have said, let's say, all of this is kind of simplified. For example, compare with something else. For example, what about if I tell you something like the countries, but probably no, are countries, population, probably no, they are angry, and this is what they told Alberto Fernandez, when was it, last week, last Sunday, yes, okay. Okay. Again, in this case, the head is let's determine a res. That has got, let's select two elements. One of which is the one on the right population. And in some other case, we have, let's say, this population of what? Of some other element, which is, let's say, our country. So the whole derivation of the whole phrase, our country's population, is generated this way. Okay. You know, what you can do very frequently is, first of all, try whenever you get stuck, okay, try to, let's say, simplify it a bit. Probably, of course, with some other meaning, right?
Sorry,
Yes.
but in the previous one, I should have added one determiner, a null determiner before crime and one other before rate.
No,
Because
no, because, for example, can you say, let's say, let me see. Let's consider crime rate, this expression. This crime rate is intolerable, you could say. Or for example, such crime rate is intolerable. Or I don't know, let's say it's crime rate. Let's see, every crime rate. What says no crime rate will be acceptable, or let's say, well, etc., etc. You can think of many others. Okay, well, if you think of, let's say, what each of these determinants, each of these overt determinants is referring to, each of them refer to what? To crime or to rate?
to rate.
You could have said, this rate is intolerable, such rate is intolerable, and so on and so forth. So, you know what? Rate, the rate, for example, if I say this rate, like this. And eventually what happens here is that crime is modifying rate. So what we need to do is consider rate, phrase. Here we will insert the noun, different color, the noun crime. And all of this becomes the complement of determinant. This or such or no or whatsoever.
But basically, because I wouldn't have merged only one from great to noun phrase. I would have written just great as a noun phrase because I thought it must merge in a binary way. I don't know how to explain.
Yes, I know. Probably what confused the issue is this idea of having, this noun phrase. But the problem is, let me see.
Don't you have a null determinant, a null
Wait a minute.
something?
No. Wait. No. Now I realize there's something. No. Now I realize there's something. No, I've taken for granted that we have seen some other elements. This will appear in 24. Okay, so to tell you the truth, yeah. Now I realize that, for example, if you ask me about this one, for example, which was the crime rate, for example, okay, to tell you the truth, I'll let you know where it is, okay? I don't know how to sort it out. Wait and see until we reach 24. Okay. Yes, now I see that, we're a bit behind. That's why.
Because we were thinking, because everything was binary, like two branches, so it was difficult to understand one.
Yes, the book mentions all the time violating the binary. I don't know what.
Yes, that was my doubt about the was any null
something.
Well, wait and see. Let's see. So far, I don't know. Let's push it away. Okay. Yes. What I can tell you is that rules are there to be broken. Okay. So we'll see. Yes. Now I realize that what Rodrigo was sending me now, in a way, something that we haven't seen. Okay. Because we still have to do with 23 and 24. At that point, you will understand that. Okay, but never mind. Okay, you have like an anticipation of what is coming. Okay, but in the previous ones, for example, in 22, any other
yes. I have a question in sentence number 2, where it says they have sent the parcel to Glasgow. Is there affix hopping?
No. Affix hopping only occurs whenever you have simple tenses, such as the simple past and the simple present. If you do have an overt auxiliary, for sure, no affix hopping at all.
So I have to write the verb as is given in the sentence.
Sent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So past participle, no affix hopping because it's fixed.
Yes. If you do have auxiliaries, no affix hopping. Affix hopping only occurs whenever in English you have some affix that cannot remain in that position. Only in the simple past tense, or else in the simple present for the third person in the singular. Okay? Right?
Sorry, what did you say? If an affix,
if we have got an affix that cannot remain in that position where we generated it.
Jose, I have a question regarding that, about the auxiliaries. What will happen in the case of a negative auxiliary? would it generate like that, or the not will be generated in some other place?
What you mean negative auxiliary?
Yes, like haven't, didn't. I don't know.
Well, haven't is, no, let me see. Some kind of contraction in which you have, let's say in the negative. Well, again, for the time being, I don't know.
Okay, great.
Yes. Then, or I can anticipate that, you know, the negative will generate in a specific position. Okay.
All right. Okay.
As
Thank
a
you.
new head, as a new head. Okay. As a new head. Okay. Any other things?
Yes. On the sentence uploaded by classmate, sentence number 6, the passengers were carrying all their bags on trolleys. I don't know who was, but I wrote V shell with a lowercase v and an apostrophe, but on the exercise it is a capital V and P. So I don't know if I'm wrong or.
In the V column or in the V shell?
V shell.
I think there's something about there's a mistake there of putting with the capital letters. The upwards V's are with capital letters in the PDF, and they are not corrected, but they are V with in minúscula.
Okay, letters. We've got in here 22.7. Probably could have made some mistake in the correction, you know, that's something that we need to be aware of. So, carrying on trolleys, yes, good. All the bags, excellent. Yes, you're right. Yes, exactly. Yes. This other V should be a lowercase v. Yes, to make a clear difference between the V column and the V shell, please. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So let's see. From this position, I won't be able to draw anything here. Have to download it.
From VP, the first VP upwards.
Oops. Well, no, it's much worse. Well, but never mind. Okay, no, in this way it's impossible. Okay, I should have looked it up in the original version. Okay, yes, this is what happens when you do it this way. You know, that's why it's better to have the pictures here. Okay, but anyway, yeah. V prime V. Here you have the predetermined phrase or the trolleys, and here you have a I guess a PP on, I don't know what, all the bags on trolleys. And then we should have a V shell. And please do make a difference between V core and V shell. Okay, the other one should be in lowercase letters. Okay.
Jose,
Yes.
do you expect us to write predeterminate phrase, central determinate phrase, and all the varieties?
Whenever you have more than one determinant, yes. Why?
Maybe because you don't want us to study by heart, but this is the only way.
No, but you can very well understand the classification of the determinants, and you can very well tell what each of these features has got. Okay? May start to make some association between the ones that, let's say, the central determinants share with each other on the one hand, or the post determinants share with each other on the other hand, etc. Okay? It's on pages 129 and 130 of the book, of the other book, okay, of Michael. If you have got only one determinant, no need to, I mean, this is to call split a category. When you have only one determinant for a phrase, no need to indicate whether it's central, pre, or post, punctuality about it. I mean, the idea is to go for the simpler, the better. Okay, but sometimes we will need to specify what each of these determinants, what subcategory, let's say each of these determinants is, if you do have more than one determinant for a phrase. Understand what I mean? So the point is, let's say the principle is, if the need arises because the, let's say, phrase is kind of a bit too complex, then we will have to do so. Otherwise, let's go for a simpler, meaning let's go for the umbrella term. In this case, determinant, that will do. Okay? What else?
There are some sentences that we don't have the key. Perhaps next class we can check them out, not to, you know, use all the time with this.
If you don't have the keys because you haven't sent them for me to correct them.
Okay, sorry.
Meaning you have to work, I mean, you are grown-ups and you know what you have to do, organize yourselves in some way, and then, you know, if you send me something to correct, I will, okay? Yes, but anyway, you know, what I can tell you is, for example, the ones that are very important, I would say the files that are very important will be 22 and 23. In this case, what I would recommend all of you to do all of these sentences in these two files, in 22 and in 23. Okay, of course, we're dealing with 23 today. Then at some point we will mention, I don't know what, for example, in 24, something kind of weird, in 25, I don't know what else, and so on and so forth. Okay, and they are pretty much alike, and you need to be able to generate them. Okay, no need to do them all. Okay, I mean, some people will need to do them all, and that's up to you. Okay, but you need to think of how to generate them. Okay, to understand what is going on there. Okay, it's not a question of, let's say, drawing like 1,000 trees until you understand what is going on there. No. Okay, I mean, if you need it, fine. Okay, I know that you have to. But probably the ones in 22 and the ones in 23, you know, are advisable for you to do them all or to recognize them all, how to generate them. Okay, right? Well, what are the questions? Come on. No doubts?
Now
I think
we are going to deal with intransitive verbs, and now there is a subclassifications in generative, which is an accusative and an ergative. My question is if in the case of transitive, are they considered or an accusative, or
No, transitive
don't make that?
are neither an accusative nor an ergatives. No. An accusatives and an ergatives are subtypes of intransitive verbs.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
Because in the booklet, there is a sentence that says that an accusatives are those that select an internal argument, but there can be another external. So then I got confused. I will look.
No. But the point is, for example, no, yes. Okay, let me see. You know what? What you're saying is right in the sense that you can have a sentence such as Susan has broken the glass. Is that possible? I could have said okay, so probably, let's imagine that we are together, in a party, okay, here, okay, and I hear some noise. My question is, what happens? And some of you says, Susan has broken the glass. Or somebody else says, the glass has broken. Okay, meaning their representation of an event in their heads is the same, meaning they are telling me what happened, okay, but the way in which each of these two different people explain me what is going on there, okay, is different. Meaning the representation of reality is the same. It's some fact. Now, how we put the fact into words is variable, and that depends on grammar precisely. The second sentence, the first sentence actually is clearly transitive. So no one negative, no one accusative, nothing to do with that. Okay? The second one is what type of, it's intransitive. Then if it is intransitive, it will be either an accusative or an ergative. Mind you, I can talk about, let's say, transitive, intransitive, an accusative, an ergative, considering the whole sentence or considering just a verb in the sentence. Okay? In a way, what I'm resorting to is the projection. Let me paraphrase what I said. I could have said, in the first sentence, broken is clearly a TV, transitive. If it is transitive, it will never be either an accusative or an ergative. Forget about that. Okay? In the second version, broken is intransitive. If it is intransitive, I need to think of whether it is an accusative or an ergative. Okay? Let me give you some other example. Imagine that I tell you such a thing as, let's say, Tom is reading a book. Sorry, automatic guess. But this sentence could have been expressed. Okay. Imagine that somebody sitting there, and then I can hear me saying, what is going on? Okay, and somebody says to me, oh, you know what? Tom is reading a book. Okay, well, somebody else tells me, Tom is reading his son. Or probably somebody else could have said, Tom is reading. Okay, this is something that we can do all the time in whatever language, and languages have different strategies to, let's say, incorporate some additional argument or do away with one of them. Okay, I think that I told you something in Spanish, for example, that my father used to say something like, I don't know, pinté la cocina. Or my father could have said, more standard version, let's say, this. Okay. Now, if you go for the English version, exactly the same thing happens. Okay. That's why, for example, some things become really funny. Those of you have seen Friends, for example, okay, or I don't know, nowadays it could have been, let's say, The Simpsons or whatever, okay, which is meant to be funny, okay. At some point, somebody says something like, I painted you, well, I don't remember exactly, you know, the page. Okay, or I painted the kitchen. Stands verb. Or I was painting. Okay, see, all of which are possible. Okay, probably number 8 is clearly substandard, and that's what makes it funny, okay, in special context, okay, because this thing that I was telling you about, let's say, my father, my mother, this effect, you know, somebody told me, you know what, there is a chapter in The Simpsons that says something like that, blah, 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 and they told me something like that, okay? Okay, yes, you see? If you check it out, it just happens all the time. Okay, now, let's say in traditional terms, I would say that sentence number 1 contains a TV, or also is a TV. It's a transitive clause, let's say. The same happens with number 3 and with number 6 and no, with number 6, sorry. Number 7 or number 9. All these contain transitive verbs in traditional analysis, or let's say the predicator there selects 2 arguments, one of which is internal and the other of which is external. So all of the sentences are analyzed in exactly the same way. On the other hand, you have, let's say, here, this one, number 4, contains a ditransitive verb, okay, which is what happens in number 6, and also in number 8. So the generation of these sentences in the lexical domain, in whatever language, whether English or Spanish, is exactly the same. In the lexical domain. then some kind of movement will occur so that we have the actual sentence in the, let's say, in the version that we have, because clearly you can very well see that here, when we have A in number 6, okay, the integer object is positioned in what place in Spanish before the verb, okay? Something kind of weird, let's say, okay? So something else will happen, okay? But let's say in the lexical domain, the way they are generated is exactly the same in all of the cases, where it is English or Spanish, okay? Or many other languages, which are head first, let's say. Okay. Now, the others, number 3, 5, and 10, contain intransitive verbs in the traditional analysis. Okay, but here comes the difference, because we will have to recognize in the genitive framework whether these sentences or these predicators are unaccusatives or unergative. What do you think? Number 2 is what type? Unaccusative or unergative?
Unaccusative.
Absolutely. Number 5?
Unergative.
Unergative.
Absolutely. Number 10?
Unergative.
Absolutely. Yes. Meaning what? In number 5 and number 10, respectively, Tom and I are external arguments. What is not the case for number 2, the glass is clearly an internal argument. The glass is not the doer of the breaking, but the one that undergoes the breaking. Okay, right? So, how we generate these sentences, let's focus on the blue or violet ones, okay? It's a different way. And this is what we're going to explain today, and what you will have to recognize in all of the sentences in 23 or in whatever file that comes next. Well, can you follow? You see that what I'm interested in is, first of all, what happens in the lexical domain. Mind you, in the lexical domain, I'm not talking about subject or anything at all. I'm talking about predicator and arguments. Because subject is some syntactic element that happens higher up in the derivation, okay, in the functional domain. Okay, can you follow? Well, then, very frequently, I resort to the explanation in this way. For example, imagine that we're saying, imagine that my father versus slide. These two different sentences have got only one letter in difference between them. Still, their generation is completely different. Why such a thing happens? To begin with, both of them in these versions are intransitive. the next question is, okay, intransitive, whether unaccusative or unergative, only in their intransitive uses. Okay, right? So, what about number 11? Unaccusative or unergative?
Unaccusative.
Absolutely. Meaning what? My father is not the one that did the dying. The dying happened to him. Okay? My father is an internal argument which underwent the action of dying. Okay? If he was the doer of the dying, I would say, has killed himself. Okay? Which is possible in some other explanation, but in this other case, it would have been a transitive construction. Okay? Or has committed suicide, again, transitive. Okay, you see the way in which we can express one sentence, okay, will vary because there are many alternatives very frequently. In number 12, it's clearly the verb or the whole clause by projection, the verb and the whole clause by projection is unergative because my father is the doer of the lying. Okay? The one who told somebody some lies, let's say. Is it clear? So this is what we need to recognize. If we think of, if we contrast sentences number 11 and number 12 in traditional terms, I don't see any difference. I would have analyzed them in the very same way, in traditional terms. But now, in generative terms, we will go for a further explanation for them. Okay? So, let's start with one of them, for example, number 11. Okay? Number 11. In number 11, first of all, I need to think of the way in which it generates in the lexical domain. Meaning what? The predicator is clearly died. And as you very well said, died selects an internal argument. In all of the unaccusatives, there is no V shell because there is no external argument. So the only argument or the two arguments, because it can be the case that they select two arguments also, but the arguments of the unaccusative verbs or of the unaccusative constructions will be internal. This is what you need to recognize. Okay? And in the book, you have way too many, well, 6 tests. There are many others, to tell you the truth. Okay? To recognize the difference between them. Okay? Then I can give you a couple of others. Okay? Well, clearly, my father is an internal argument of died, which means that my father generates in the complement position of died. Okay? In the lexical domain, we don't have any other internal argument. Then we close the V-co domain. And as in this case, we don't have any external arguments, no we shall. So all of this is what makes up the lexical domain. Can you follow so far?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions?
So no we shall for unaccusative verbs. And how do we move to the...
Wait. I don't know. Be patient. Now we're into it. Okay, but remember that for an accusative, never ever the official. Okay, right? So all of this is the lexical domain. Now we pass on to the functional domain. In the functional domain, I will have the auxiliaries that show, for example, tense. In this case, T. T has got what element in head position?
ED?
Remember the sentence.
Has.
I can't remember. It was in present perfect. I didn't understand.
Yes, has. Okay. Yes. Then T, remember, it has got an intermediate projection T prime and later a maximum projection TP. At this point, something needs to become the subject of T or the subject of this clause. Then I will attract some element from this position, which one? My father. This is an instance of what kind of movement? Argument.
Argument.
And it moves because from, let's say, the extraction side is a complement of vehicle. The landing side is a specific position of T. The next question is, okay, fantastic, but why does my father undergo this kind of movement? Why does this argument undergo this kind of movement? Again, because of two reasons. On the one hand, to satisfy the EPP feature position of T. Okay, meaning what? T requires a subject. Okay, and it takes it from somewhere in a sentence. In English, it needs to be a word.
So even though, sorry, Jose, even though my father is not the doer of the action, we have to move that argument to upwards, right?
Let me paraphrase your sentence, because I want you to understand, okay? I mean, not that I'm criticizing, but I want you to understand there is something wrong in the question itself. For example, imagine that I tell you, even though it is raining, you were explaining grammar. No, there are two different things. What happens in the lexical domain has absolutely nothing to do with what happens in the functional domain.
Okay.
Right? For example, can you repeat what you said so that we understand the problem?
I said, even though my father is not the doer of the action, we have to move.
Exactly. You know what? Exactly. Because the point is that anything can become the subject of a clause.
Right.
The doing of the action, the doing of the action, the doing of whatever action has to do with some kind of argument which happens in the lexical domain. Okay, the doing of the action, whether something is or is not the doing of some action, okay, that has to do with how we generate it in the lexical domain. Something else completely different from that is what happens in the functional domain, meaning what? Whether something becomes the subject or not.
Okay. Mhm.
You understand what I mean? Okay?
Yes,
Meaning
yes.
anything can become the subject. You can have an infinitive in subject position. You can have a dual in subject position. You can have a, let's say, a notional object in, precisely my father is called, in technical terms, let's say, a notional object. Is a notional object. Let's say, semantically speaking, my father is an object. Is the object of the dying. You know what? That is why precisely, imagine that this is some kind of news. I tell you, okay, what happened? And somebody says, let's invent in Spanish. No, let me shift to Spanish. ¿Qué pasó? Y me dices, murió Mauro Viale. Why is it? ¿Por qué en castellano decimos murió Mauro Viale o murió, no sé, qué sé yo, conocido, no sé, el de los Rolling que murió hace unas semanas, ¿cómo se llama este? Charlie Watts, ¿era? Bueno, no importa, Pindonga, murió Pindonga, qué sé yo. ¿Sí? Si vos te fijas cómo nosotros lo decimos en castellano, ¿sí? Y ahí tienen otra, some other things that you can apply. Okay? You can tell me in Spanish, for example, ¿sabes qué? Se me murió el perrito. You know what? Murió fulanito, fulanita. In Spanish, we tend to produce this element in the position in which it generates. In English, we cannot say, died Charlie Watts. Okay, died Mauro Viale. Let's invent. Died Susana Jimenez. What? You would have said, Susana Jimenez has died. Why? Because something needs to become the subject. We pronounce it that way in English. But where it generates is in some other position. Going back to some other, think of, you know what, because this is a clear test that you can apply in order for you to recognize the difference between unergatives and unaccusatives. How would you translate sentence number 2 into Spanish?
El vidrio se ha roto. O el vaso.
Se
Se
rompió.
rompió el vidrio.
Me vas a decir, en castellano, yo vengo, acordate, estamos en una fiesta, que yo digo, siento un ruido, que yo vengo acá y digo, ¿qué pasó? Y alguien me dice, se rompió el vaso, o se rompió el vidrio, no sé, lo que sea. Esa es la manera en que nosotros lo generamos. Y nosotros lo generamos en esa posición. Porque el vidrio es un argumento interno. Y nosotros no necesitamos mover la posición preverbal. As they do need in English. In English, they can say, has broken the glass. Okay? You could have said, Susan rompió el vaso, o Susan rompió el vidrio. Number 1. Okay? You see, what I mean is that in whatever language, which is a head first language, okay, we generate the sentences in the very same way. Then what we end up pronouncing in these languages may differ.
¿Eso
Okay.
es porque en español no tenemos obligatorio el sujeto?
No tenemos obligatorio, exactamente. Exactamente. Claro que sí.
In Spanish, we also have the se, because if we just say rompió el vaso, sounds odd.
Yes, exactly. You're right. Absolutely. That's another way. Only that this se has way too many different meanings. Okay? Right? O sea, no es lo mismo se rompió el vaso como, qué sé yo, se afeitó, se bañó, whatever. Okay? There are different uses of se. Well, but never mind, because we will focus on what happens in English, okay? But at least, you see, this is something that we can very well recognize in these so-called unaccusative constructions. In a couple of them, we will be in doubt, and that will be kind of difficult, to tell you the truth. Okay, in some cases, the translation will not work, to tell you the truth. Okay, that's why we need to check it out with some other tests, not with only this one. Okay, well, but going back to this, why is it that my father undergoes argument movement here? Because of two reasons: to satisfy the EPP feature of T. This is precisely what happens in English, okay? And also because as the verb is unaccusative, typically, you know, a verb selects accusative, or let's say assigns accusative case to its complement. Meaning, again, let me shift to Spanish. Se rompió el vaso o ella lo rompió. Ese lo rompió, ese objeto directo, el vaso es un objeto directo, es un objeto nocional. Ese vaso, ¿sí? Voy a decir, lo rompió, es un objeto. ¿Sí? Typically, a transitive verb assigns accusative case to its complement. Sometimes, what happens is that the verb precisely is realized in an unaccusative form, such as this one, or the one I think in number 2, I think it was, okay, the glass is broken. So, an accusative means that the verb cannot assign accusative case to its complement. So, poor thing, the argument, will try to get some other type of case. Which one? Nominative. That's why it ends up in subject position. You understand what I mean?
I got lost, sorry.
Where?
You said that the argument of movement happens for two reasons, right? One, to fulfill the EPP feature of T, okay? Because we understand by this feature that we require a subject.
This subject, this T will require a subject.
Okay, and then because the verb assigns which case?
No.
It doesn't assign anything.
Yes, this verb, die, as it is unaccusative, prefix.
Yes, that it doesn't.
Yes, it doesn't, it cannot assign the case to its complement.
Okay, so the complement will move
to get what?
Nominative
case.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, is it clear?
Yes.
Yes. Any other questions? Probably let's finish with this. You know, on top of everything, as you very well know, there is a CP layer.
Jose, can unaccusative verbs select like two internal arguments?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. And
I was thinking an example such as my father has died in a car accident, for example. That would be another internal argument.
In a car accident, I don't think that in a car accident is an internal argument in that case.
All right.
In that case, I would take there to be an accent, a clear accent, but
Okay. I
there
don't
are
want to
some
get
other
confused
cases-
with
Mhm.
what we just saw, we would just, free place predicates and that stuff. So,
Okay, yes, but we will get to see that in some other examples.
And if I say I live in London,
Okay. Okay. That's right. Yes, exactly. Clearly, I and in London are arguments. Okay. Yes, they are clearly arguments. But there is some additional problem there. Okay, but let's start with the, first of all, that typical constructions, and then we will pass on to the kind of, let's say, weird things that we can have. Okay? Well,
okay.
so this is the way so far in which we generate an accusative construction with only one argument in this case. Okay? Well, but what about in the case of an unergative construction such as my father has light, number 12. And here we will have for sure a different type of construction, let's say. 12. Well, there is a linguist that recognized how to generate this type of construction in English. Precisely by making a contrast with what is possible in many other languages that he studied. What I can tell you is that the verb light, I write down light because I do have the auxiliary has, okay? Well, but the verb light, okay, can be expressed in some other way. I could have said told lies. Okay. This is what happens in all of the, and remember that, in all of the unergative verbs. In all of the unergative verbs. Meaning what? All of the unergative verbs will select an internal argument, a GP, but this GP will become incorporated into the lexical root of the verb. Again, this argument, this GP, becomes incorporated, meaning becomes part of the verb, becomes part of the lexical root of the verb. Let me put it in some other way. For example, can I say in English, let's say, my father is fishing fish? You say, oh, come on, stupid. Okay, what else?
Yes, we can.
No, come on.
Yes, that was one of the examples of, I think it was geocognate.
Ah, okay, but no. You can say, my father is fishing, let's say, tuna is fishing, salmon is fishing, I don't know what, okay? But, no. In the case of the cognate, because the other example that you have, okay, singing a song.
Yes.
Okay, in English, you can say, whoever, my father, my brother, my sister, whoever, okay, Jack, is singing a song. No problem there, absolutely there. In Spanish, can you say such a thing as, mi hermano está cantando una canción? No, it's redundant. You can say, está cantando una balada, está cantando un tango, está cantando... You could have said, está cantando una canción de fulanito o de fulanita, qué sé yo. ¿Ok? Una canción de... Se llama Dal Espósito, canta. Bueno, no sé, de fulano, qué sé yo. ¿Ok? Well, in that case you can say, está cantando una canción de fulanito o de fulanita. ¿Ok? Qué sé yo. ¿Ok? But, ¿está cantando una canción? No way. Mi hermano está pescando pescado. Y sí, su marmota, ¿qué va a estar pescando? ¿Sí? Vos me puedes decir, en some other context, está pescando, qué sé yo, truchas, está pescando mojarritas, se está pescando un resfriado, pongámosle en una expresión más península Spanish, if you want. Okay, all right. But otherwise, fishing, fish, it's impossible, it's redundant. Okay? You would have said, my father is catching fish. That's okay. For example, we can say, let's say Susan, Jack, whoever. Jack is lying some lies or has lied some lies. You could have said, Jack has lied that he arrived early, that he was working. Okay. Or you can say, but has lied lies? No. Understand what I mean? So, think of, let's say, many of these verbs that do exist. Can you think of something kind of impossible, either in English or in Spanish in some other way? So, such an example like that. For example, what about if I tell you, Pedrito está comiendo comida? Would you accept that? You can say, está comiendo un sándwich, está comiendo, qué sé yo, no sé, una fruta, está comiendo lo que sea, but está comiendo comida. O Pedrito está bebiendo bebida. What? I mean, if you say, he's drinking, let's say, some water, some tea, some coffee, some matcha, whatever. Fine. But he's drinking a drink. It's redundant. You would have said, he's having a drink. Okay? You have resorted to a different lexical verb altogether. Now, what happens here is that the internal argument of the verb becomes part of the lexical root of the verb, or becomes incorporated. This process is what is called incorporation. We'll have to write it down here because it's a kind of weird thing. Incorporation. This process was discovered by Mark Baker in 1988, when he analyzed that, you know what, in many of the Aboriginal languages that he studied, this typically happens. Okay, this is something that happens all the time. In a way, all of the intransitive verbs that are unergatives do select an internal argument which is not mentioned explicitly there, because this argument has become incorporated into the lexical root of verb. Can you follow? Think of, let's say, some other intransitive verb. For example, let's see, let's say, if I say, I don't know, Jack is explaining. Is that possible? Yes. Jack is explaining, I mean, you can make it a TV by saying he's explaining a lesson, he's explaining this topic, he's explaining something. But can you say Jack is explaining some explanation? No way. You see? What about if I tell you, let's say, my brother is TikToking? Is that possible? Yes, my brother was TikToking all night. Okay, well, can you say my brother was TikToking some TikTok? No way. Probably my brother was TikToking some dance or some, let's say, some recipe, or was TikToking, I don't know what. Okay, some video, etc., etc. Okay, but otherwise you would have said just Jack was, or my brother, or whoever was TikToking. That would do. You understand what I mean? So look at what happens whenever we have a negative verb. If you happen not to mention in whatever language the internal argument, it's because the internal argument has become part of the lexical root of the verb. Okay? Then, in this case, as there is no other internal argument, we close the VP call. But we do have a V shell because we do have an external argument. So here we will have VV prime VP shell. Land will undergo some head-to-head movement now, from head V core to head V shell. Why is that? To give room to the external argument, which is, in this case, my father. Okay, so what we need to remember is that whenever we have some doer of some action, technically speaking, an agent, this agent will always generate in specified position of V shell. Okay, all of this, V core and V shell, make up the lexical domain. And now we pass on to the functional domain. Meaning, eventually, something will become the subject. But that has nothing to do with what happens in the lexical domain, if you know what I mean. Okay, in this case, oops, how much room for this? Well, but it's pretty much the same thing, you know. I have got, let me go in a kind of almost horizontal way. T, in here T, I will have has, T prime, TP. In specified position of T, I need to have something that occupies that position, which in this case is my father. What needs to be clear is that whether you pronounce something in subject position, this element needs to come from somewhere in the lexical domain, in whatever position of the lexical domain. Okay? Why does this argument movement occur? Well, because of the two reasons that we mentioned more than once, I guess, meaning to satisfy the EPP feature of T and also to get nominative case. And then on top of everything, we have got a C layer. So if we compare these two sentences, so the generation of these two sentences, which otherwise, let's say in traditional terms, would have been analyzed in exactly the same way. Here, there Definitely not. If you compare what happens in the unaccusative construction and in the unergative construction. Okay? So to summarize now, unaccusative constructions or unaccusative verbs will not have a V shell because there is no external argument. Okay? On the other hand, unergative verbs or unergative constructions will have a V shell precisely because they do select an external argument. Apart from that, way at the bottom, they will have some incorporation, meaning what? Some internal argument of these verbs will become part of the lexical root of the verb. Is it clear now? With this, we will be able to generate all of the ones that appear in file 23. But any questions before? Anything else that you'd like to clarify, to paraphrase, to want me to repeat or something? No?
Maybe next week.
Okay, maybe next week when you work on, some other sentences. Okay, but we still have some time. First of all, I don't know where would it first. How will we identify the different types of verbs that we have here? Which of them is an accusative? Which of them is an ergative? Or not? Probably happens. I don't remember. Okay, let's do it. Okay, first of all, for you to understand that. Let's say, in number one, Windows is closing. What do you think it is? An accusative or an ergative? I mean, the predicate is clearly closing.
An accusative.
An accusative.
Accusative.
You will agree? Would you bet $1 million?
Yes.
Okay, you are the winner then. Very good. Okay, fantastic. Number two, the window has broken.
An accusative.
Absolutely. In number three, we have Susan said that my brother was fishing. Said is transitive. Okay, so no problem about it. What about fishing?
An ergative.
An ergative.
Yes, that's right. He has fallen on the coals of the yard. Fallen?
On purpose?
An accusative.
It doesn't matter whether it is on purpose or not, mind you. Okay? No, it's not a question of doing that on purpose or accidentally.
He undergoes the fall, so I would say it's an accusative.
Absolutely. Yes. In number five, the nanny thought the baby was sleeping. Thought is TV. Okay, so beyond this. What about sleeping?
An ergative.
An ergative.
Yes. Some problems have a reason.
An accusative.
An accusative.
Yes. There have appeared some problems.
But isn't this transitive?
No.
No, because we have there.
Because
Okay.
Yeah.
Identity.
It looks like transitive because the notion object remains in that position. Okay? No. But it's an accusative. What about when number right with the verb to be? Have we seen the different types of the verb to be? Well, how to generate,
No.
reversible or irreversible? Well,
No.
I can tell you is that now you have the verb to be as a main verb. I mean, it will be for sure. Okay, but then we'll see what to do in this other case. Okay, meaning for the verb to be, never ever will we have an external argument. Remember that. Okay. Number 9, realized is a TV. What about melted?
Sorry, what would you've just said is the verb to be with there or always the verb to be?
Always, 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 always as the main verb, mind you, not as an auxiliary mean. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Always an accusative. Okay, there are some things that you know always the same. That have no exceptions. At least you know some things that have got no exceptions. Well, what about melted?
Unaccusative.
Yes. I suppose it must have been rain. Suppose it's a TV, what about rain?
Unergative.
Charge of the additions was talking on the phone. Talking?
Unergative.
Unergative.
So the passengers must have arrived at the terminal.
Unaccusative.
Yes. Arrive is always an accusative. There are a couple of other verbs, at least, that are a bit weird to us, native speakers of Spanish, okay? Even to them, native speakers of English, you know, such as come and go. Remember this, for the time being, you write this down, remember this, go and come are unaccusatives. Even if you say, they went to the cinema, so that's why I told you, careful, because, I mean, if they went to the cinema, it's because they decided that nobody put a gun to their heads, okay? Okay, so careful with this idea of willingness, okay? Later on we'll see, I will give you some other clues why the verb go is an accusative, okay? But remember this, go is an accusative, no we shall, the same holds true for come, okay? And arrive, by the way. Number 13, I would like to write down what happened in my grammar. Well, like is a TV. Right here, you got a phrasal verb, which I take for granted that you must have read the file that I've shared with you guys, okay? How to generate the phrasal verbs, okay? So, something else beyond this. What happened?
Sorry, what file?
I forgot to. Well, if I have forgotten to, I will. Okay. Yes, I will. I will tell you how to generate. I will share a file, okay, for you to recognize how to generate the phrasal verbs on the one hand, as opposed to the prepositional verbs on the other hand. Okay. We will discuss this some other time. Okay. Well, what happened?
Unaccusative.
Unaccusative.
Yes, definitely. Number 14, he can see the C is TV. As teaching on his father's boat is unraveling. What about unraveling?
Unaccusative.
Yes. Okay. So at least you can very well recognize unaccusatives from unergatives, okay, or most of the times you can, okay. Now, let me give you probably some other case, because some other example Because in the ones that I've started with, we have got in number 11 and number 12 here, we have got only one overt argument, let's say. In both cases, my father. In number 11, my father is an internal argument. In number 12, it is an external argument. You see that they occupy different positions in the lexical domain. Well, it can be the case that unaccusative, for example, select not one, but two arguments. So let me see how to put a lot of this. You remember that at some point, I guess, I must have told you about, let's say, the different possibilities of the generation within the lexical domain. Now we can see all of the possibilities that we can have. In the vehicle, we could have, forget about unaccusative or negatives for the one minute. In the vehicle, we can have room for two internal arguments, which I have called A and B. And in the V shell, there is room for one external argument. I mean, the most complex version that we will have is one, such as the ones that we have seen so far, in which we have the three of them. It can be the case that we have only an A, one internal argument, and a C, one external argument. This is what happens typically in the so-called transitive verbs. Because in the transitive constructions, you have the doer of the action, okay, or the experiencer of the action, and then the internal argument, okay? Well, but to tell you the truth, every other possible combination can occur. For example, I could have had only something like A and B, and not C. You might wonder what would be the case for this one. Well, I'll let you know for the time being, but at least what I can tell is that if there is no external argument, this is an unaccusative construction.
Is it C or B in the last one?
My mistake, yes, sorry, stupid teacher. Yes, sorry. Thank you. Yes, A and B, yes, yes. Okay, so in the last one, A and B, meaning you have only two internal arguments. Okay, there exist some unaccusative constructions with two internal arguments, no external, but two internal ones. Okay, and then you know, what are the possibilities? It could be the case that we have only an A, and no B, and no C. Or probably one, oops, should have been a violet one. What is missing? Let me see, probably something like this, something like that with the V shell. I do have an overt C and something here, you know, the triangle that becomes part of the lexical root of the verb. The last one is for the ones that we've done for the unaccusative verbs. Okay, I mean, you know what? Everything is possible. Like A, B, and C, only A, only C, only B, A and B, but not C, A and C, but not B, and so on and so forth. Okay. And what will be very important for you to recognize is what happens in the lexical domain. Well, let me give you some example of one of them at least. For example, if I tell you this sentence, Jack has fallen the 10th floor. Okay. To begin with, remember that so far, because next week we will talk about adjuncts, okay, and we will have to redefine what an adjunct is. From the 10th floor is not an adjunct. Why not? Because is it the same to have fallen as to have fallen from the 10th floor?
No,
Definitely not.
there's a difference.
The meaning does change a lot. Fallen is what type of verb? Yeah.
Unaccusative.
Unaccusative.
Yes. First of all, intransitive, clearly intransitive. Okay? Yes. And it is unaccusative, yes. Only that it selects two internal arguments. Meaning from the 10th floor, okay, is clearly an argument because it does change the meaning of Jack has fallen. Okay? I assume that if I just say Jack has fallen, well, poor thing, let's assume that Jack is a little child, okay? Well, probably poor thing, you know, he cries for a minute, but then he stands up again, okay? And he keeps on running, okay? And he has been doing all the time, okay? But what about if Jack has fallen from the 10th floor?
The result would be different. Probably die.
Absolutely. Yeah, probably at least he will be in a serious condition at least.
Yes.
Okay, and he wants, you know, he wants to end up, you know, immediately, you know, on his own, and well, unless, you know, poor Jack is kind of made of plastic or, you know, rubber. Okay, well, but in a way, this tells us that from the 10th floor is not an adjunct. Careful. Okay? It's definitely not an adjunct. It's necessary piece of information because it changes the meaning of fallen. Well, in this case, I have got two internal arguments then, Jack and from the 10th floor. Okay? Then how to generate this sentence? I would say that fallen selects a PP from, now you have two determinants there, the 10th floor, okay? One of which is a central determiner, and everything that has to do with numbers is a post-determiner. Right, chance. Flow. Okay, this is the first internal argument of fallen. But in this other case, we do have some other internal argument. Then we will have in specified position of equal, Jack. Well, and then the rest like T, T prime, TP, and Jack, who I think will undergo this argument movement in the recent way as we have done. Okay, so you see that the important thing is to get to recognize what happens in the lexical domain. What type of verb you have, what type of arguments each of these verbs selects, and then the rest is kind of, let's say, repeated systematically. So clear? So your task then will be what? To keep on working with all of the sentences in, because now it's time, okay, on the all of the sentences in 22 and in 23, okay, right? You will send me your files. Let me see, somebody else who was not here at the very beginning. Flavia,
Yes, yes. Me.
Carla.
María Noé.
Carla, who else?
Mariel Nis.
Mariel, okay, yes. Who else?
Probably me, I was late.
Paula.
Yes, you went. Paula, what Paula? Paula Benitez, yes, okay. Anybody else?
Andrea Alessandrela.
Andrea.
María Noé.
María Noé. Anybody else?
Leonidas here.
Yes, Leonidas there. Okay, Paula, Carla, Mariel, Florencia, Ariela, Luna, Rodriguez, Mariana, Jimena, I got you all. Okay? Well, is it clear?
Jose, what do you put in there, in the existential there?
Expletive, EXPL.
Okay. And is it an expletive phrase or?
Oh, no, just directly expletive. No, expletive. Okay. No need to make it a phrase. And by the way, the expletive does not come from the lexical domain. Why? Because the expletive has got no meaning.
Okay.
Right? Well, so try to do these sentences. Next week, we will see what doubts you must have encountered, you must have had, okay, either from 22 or the previous ones even, or 23, okay? I will appreciate if you can send me at least one of each, organize yourselves in some way, so that you can send me a sentence by email from 23, or, the pending sentences from 22. At least these are important, I would say. I would appreciate it if you can send them to me by Saturday, okay? Let's say either today or tomorrow in the morning, but I will accept them in any case, okay? And then I will correct them and I will share with you all, and next week we'll see what other questions you might have, okay? All right? Because these two files are the most important ones. The others will be kind of tiny derivations, tiny little things here or there for each other. Okay? Right?
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Okay then. So see you next week and have a nice Students' Day on Tuesday, next Tuesday. Okay?
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Oh, happy
you.
Teacher's Day, Jose.
Teacher's Day today.
Happy yes.
Teacher's
Day.
Thank you.
Happy Teacher's Day.
Teacher's Day.
Yeah.
Okay, see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next
Bye.
Friday. Bye. Nice weekend.
Bye. See you next time.